I want to personally thank all of you for attending today. We are here to inform you about a Toronto Police Service initiative that was named Project Accountability, which has now become a permanent mandate of the Financial Crimes Unit Asset Forfeiture Section. The Civil Remedies Act, which has been in effect since 2001, it was upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada in a 7-0 decision in 2009, provides statutory requirements to all owners of properties in the province of Ontario to be responsible owners. The Act states that properties that are used for unlawful activity, which includes criminal offences, drug offences, and provincial offences, can be subject to forfeiture as an instrument of unlawful activity in the civil court. The Civil Remedies Act also allows for the forfeiture of properties where the owner is not involved but has been made aware of the lawful activity on their property. The Toronto Police Service, after consultation with the Hamilton-Wentworth Police Service, the Ottawa Police Service, and the Chatham-Kent Police Service, the first law enforcement group to enforce this section of the Act, established a criteria for unit commanders of divisional policing to identify problem properties within their divisional boundaries. The Asset Forfeiture Unit reviewed the first 93 submissions and began to serve letter of notices on the property owners. Many owners immediately complied and corrected the issues identified to their properties. Those who refused to comply or ignored the letter of notice, the asset forfeiture members have made submissions for the forfeiture of their properties. The Toronto Police Service problem property criteria is a higher standard than the threshold that is required by law. This law, combined with the proper administration by the Toronto Police Service, has lessened the strain on police resources, reduced crime and disorder in the affected communities, and has improved the quality of life and safety for the residents of Toronto. Also, today is monies and property recently seized by the Asset Forfeiture Unit. In a 4-week period over the summer, as a result of community engagement, we received approximately $3 million in cash. This $2.1 million in cash seizure is the largest single cash seizure in the Toronto Police Service history, was a result of a call to police for suspicious activity. Detective Constable Wayne King, who is an expert for the Toronto Police Service in regards to asset forfeiture, will now explain to you about the asset forfeiture, project accountability, and also explain some of the seizures of recent projects that have occurred within the Toronto Police Service.
Thank you, Bryce. Good morning. Just by way of background for our office, the mandate of the Asset Forfeiture Unit in Toronto is to identify properties that may be seized, have been seized during investigations, and make a determination if there's any avenues available to have those forfeit, whether they were through the Public Prosecution Services of Canada or the Ministry of the Attorney General, both the civil and criminal aspects of that. But this is not just about our office today and what our office has done. We've had some great successes. The photographs of our successes are here. But it's about how the community can get involved and has gotten involved to assist us in those seizures. Sir Robert Peel said in the 18th century or the 19th century that the police are the public and the public are the police. And that's very, very prevalent today. Our initiative, Project Accountability, takes that to one step further. Our office, through Project Accountability, will now hold those property owners responsible for what happens on those properties, whether they're involved or in any way adding to that crime. We've identified certain problem properties that cause community safety issues. If you take a crack house in any known division, a place where crack dealers are known to hang out, deal drugs out of, prostitution runs out of there, and if you were to drop a pebble in and around that, the crime spreads out in a wave, and it affects the community immediately around that crack house. If that landlord, say, he lives in Ottawa, and every month he comes in to collect his paycheck or his rent check, and then he goes back again to Ottawa and doesn't care what's happening on that property, he's required to care. The law in Ontario says you have to be a responsible owner. And we're not looking as the asset forfeiture unit to forfeit his property. We're looking to clean up that for the community, to stop the draws, the constant calls for service for the Toronto Police Service. We're not looking strictly to forfeit. We're looking to clean up that address. And we're hoping to do that through communication with that property owner. as Inspector Heaven said, we've had a number of successful cases in the past where a letter has been served on a property owner saying, listen, your property has been identified as a perpetual problem address. The calls for service at your property are huge compared to the calls for service for other properties in the area, and huge when compared to, you take a bar, for instance. You take a bar, and yes, bars are going to have calls for drunks. There's going to have calls for disorderlies. But there's some bars that the calls for drunks and disorderlies and shootings and stabbings are astronomical when compared to the rest. And those are the ones we want to deal with. And we work with the property owners to find ways that they can make their property safer. That's what we're looking to do. The requirements as a responsible owner of the Civil Remedies Act say that you have to promptly notify law enforcement agencies whenever the person knows or ought to know that the property has been used or is likely to be used or engaged in unlawful activity. The Civil Remedies Act also says that if you can, you have to remove that person or take steps to correct that problem in regards to that property. And if you fail to do that, then you're not a responsible owner according to the Civil Remedies Act. And although we're not solely using the Civil Remedies Act to clean up these problem properties, our first goal, obviously, during investigations is, can we take this through a criminal act? Can we take this through drug trafficking? But our goal is to somehow find a way to stop this problem property from continuing, to clean up the neighborhood, make it safer, and reduce the strain on police services. And as Bryce was mentioning, this has been a banner year for the Toronto Police Service and seizures. Currently, we've seized just in excess of $5.5 million. Almost $2.6 million of that, almost half of that came as a direct result of people calling the police when they saw something suspicious. This money here was seized because people in the condominium complex saw what they thought to be suspicious mails. The police arrived, the mails had fled, but they'd left behind 2 large safes that contained $2.1 million. There's photographs of some money up here that was seized from a hotel room. Because the cleaning staff were cleaning up, they saw what they thought was a bag of garbage. When they pulled the bag of garbage, it turned out to be just over $500,000 in cash, and they called the police. This money was meant to buy more drugs, to go back into the drug market, or it was meant to further the lifestyle of the drug traffickers that were going to use it to traffic drugs. And it was the community involvement that took that away, and that's what we want to see in the Toronto Police Service, and that's what Project Accountability is about, is getting the public more involved. It's taking an old concept and making it new again. Now, in-rem forfeiture is not new. In-rem forfeiture was back in the medieval times, back in early English law, they used in-rem forfeiture for almost all their forfeitures back in medieval law. Back in the early 20th century, in the Opium and Narcotic Drug Act, forfeitures and seizures were part of the law back then. So this is not a new concept. We're just now trying to get the public more involved, to hold the public more accountable for what happens on their property, and hopefully make our communities safer. Do we have any questions?
When it comes to the property themselves, what are they, like if you've seized a house, or I saw some in an industrial complex, what happens to that property now?
So we don't actually seize the property, which is known as an exclusive possession order. What we actually do is we just put a restraint on title. So the owner of that cannot sell it, cannot borrow against it, cannot do anything with it, and they're actually given a function where they have to maintain that property. They can't destroy it, they can't devalue it, and so it's locked. We just lock the title up. We allow them to still stay there. If they want to run their business out of there, unless there's some legal reason why they cannot, we allow them to run their business out of there. And then as the court process continues, if at the end we are successful and that property is actually forfeit, then the money goes to the province of Ontario and it's put back in to help victims of crime and to further police initiatives.
Now, if in some case, let's say this industrial unit, somebody probably owns that property, but the people renting that property, what happens to them? Or were they one and the same?
So if we don't hold the person who's renting it accountable, because a lot of times the person in a bar instance, we will go in and that tenant will be charged 20 or 30 times under the Liquor License Act for service past hours, service to intoxicated, service to underage. They are not going to stop operating because they're making a lot of money running that booze can. And so what we will then do is we will go after the landlord, and we will contact the landlord, the person who actually owns that property, say, listen, 123 Pine Street is being used to commit unlawful activities. here's what's happening there. You're now made aware. You have to clean it up, and we want to work with you to clean it up. And if he refuses, then we have to take a stronger approach and look to restrain that property.
And now with this cash and the other cash you seized, obviously it goes through the court case and the court system. Is that money, cash also go back to the Ontario government, victim services, things like that?
Yes.
Is there any one person charged?
Well, there's a number of cases up here, but in put accountability in the civil realm, because it's an in rem forfeiture, what that actually means is that there's no person being held physically accountable for that property. They have no personal loss of their liberty. They're not going to go to jail. They're not going to get a criminal record. The only thing that the civil process does is it takes that offending property away from that person, right? Because it's deemed to be an unlawful activity. But there's been a number of people. There's been people charged in relation to this investigation. This is one of the motorcycles from Project Incas, which I'm sure you guys are more than aware of with regards to the Inca security hold-up during the summer, where a large amount of cash was netted, and at the arrest, we seized a number of motorcycles, a BMW, and recovered about $130,000 in the cash that was seized. So there's a number of different cases that are up here. We've had a very successful case recently. It was Project El Mirador, almost $1.3 million worth of assets, jewelry, cars, and cash were seized and forfeit, and the forfeiture order for that came through just within the last month or month and a half. Year to date so far in Toronto, we've seized 63 vehicles. That included a boat, which some of you are aware of, the boat that was seized a few months ago after the accident. Several motorcycles. We've restrained 2 marijuana grow operations, and we're looking to forfeit those. And we've successfully forfeited so far this year 1 marijuana grow operation, and that photographs are up there for that.
So do this all belong to the same organized crime?
No, there's 6 or 7 different cases are demonstrated here. Some of them are civil asset forfeiture cases, some of them are Public Prosecution Services of Canada or federal drug cases, and some are criminal cases using the Ministry of Attorney General Criminal Division.
Can you tell us more anecdotally about the hotel employee's story?
It's a pretty simple story, really. I mean, the maids were in cleaning the room, and they saw what they thought was a bag of garbage underneath an armoire, and they pulled it out, and it was heavy, and they looked in it, and it wasn't a bag of garbage. It was a bag of cash, 2 bags of cash, actually. So they called their manager up. The manager looked at it and thought, oh, we should call the police. So the police attended, and as of today, we have no one in custody for that. The investigation is still ongoing. We know who rented the hotel room, but just because you rent a hotel room doesn't mean you have knowledge of what's in the hotel room. So there has to be some more investigation done by the police, and that there may not be any charges ever in that case.
Was the person renting the hotel room from Canada, or?
They were not from the Toronto area, but they were, well, I don't know where they were born, but they were not from the Toronto area. But they were from, they do have a Canadian address.
Which hotel was it?
It was the, I don't know if I don't know if the hotel would be happy with the statement of the hotel, so I'm not going to put the name of the hotel.
And similarly, in other cases, when you're saying that citizens got in touch with you about concerns, what do they say?
Well, in this case, it was somebody thought there was a break and enter happening at the condominium complex, and after 23 years of policing, I've interviewed several people when I was on the road as a uniformed officer who said, oh yeah, I saw somebody jump over my neighbor's fence, but I didn't want to get involved. Geez, I'd really like my neighbors to get involved if they saw somebody jump over my fence. And so this guy, the people at this unit saw what they thought to be suspicious males, and they called the police. And as a result, they were obviously there to do a home invasion to steal the $2.1 million for themselves. But because somebody else in the building cared enough to call the police, even though it wasn't their money, they knew they wanted a safer community, and as a result, we were able to recover the money.
Through your investigations, is there connections to organized crime?
Yes, there are. Some of the cases have connections to organized crime. Some of them are just one-off cases that are just somebody has finally come onto the radar screen, and we finally found out who they are, and as a result of being sort of invisible to the police for the last 10 or 15 years of their criminal lives, we finally found what they're up to and have seized items.
When you say organized crime, is there a particular sector?
No. After doing this job for 5 years, there's no, it doesn't matter, it's frauds, drugs, counterfeit property. Organized crime has got a foothold into all those different avenues because they understand the money that's involved in each one of those You know, they're very profitable ventures. Frauds are very profitable for organized crime now. Drugs are very profitable. Counterfeit goods are profitable. So there's a lot of profit out there in organized crime. We've realized that, and they've taken a stronger foothold in there. So a lot of our cases now that we deal with organized crime components.
How well the police deal with those properties, those cars, those vehicles? And,
if it's large enough to be stored and managed by the Toronto Police Service, we will look after them. The larger items get stored and managed either by the province of Ontario or by the federal government. Both the Administrative Attorney General and the Public Prosecution Services of Canada have agencies that will manage police property while it's awaiting forfeiture. So somebody else babysits it for us.
and then they might sell them for
At the end, once the forfeiture order is signed, yeah, the Administrative Attorney General or the federal government will then sell the properties at auction. On a number of occasions, if there's a mortgage outstanding, the bank will then introduce a power of sale, and the profits or proceeds from that sale will then be transferred to the appropriate government agency. In the terms of motorcycles like this or cars, they get just released at a public auction for sale.
Why are you unveiling this all today?
Well, I mean, the summer's been a good summer for us, and it's been a good summer for a number of reasons. We've had a number of positive cases that we've introduced into the accountability project. We've had a number of good community involvements. Like, this is the largest one-day seizure ever in the Toronto police history, and it's nice to get out the positive stories of community involvement and then show the community that, you know, yeah, it's good to get involved, but we're also going to force those that don't want to be involved and continue to be negligent landlords. We're going to force them to be involved.